last week we had a guy out who was working on an addition that we're building on the back of our house, and he was the concrete guy, and he's one of my former players from about 9 years ago, and I'd seen him a couple times through these last few years, but rarely. And then when we were talking, about the job that he's doing, we connected on just about a few things, but he had just stopped and he was starting to do some of the work back there in the hole that, the contractor had already dug for, the bit of the foundation. Well, he said, well, my uncle had me out, and I realized, he's talking about the contractor, who is another one of my former students, not an athlete of mine, but his wife was an athlete who I worked with and I also had in class. And so, it's kind of one of those family affairs. Well, a lot of you are going to be able to relate to this because this always happens to me when I see former players, and some of you watching this may be former players of mine. They're my kids. I think of all of them as my kids. I'm thinking of him as one of my boys. I'm thinking of the contractor and his wife. They're my kids. You teach and coach long enough. Heck, you probably don't even have to do it for very long. And you think of the kids that you coach in some ways as your own. And so I constantly now, when I'm talking with somebody about, years past, a certain season or a certain team or whatever, my boys or my girls, when I coached girls basketball in the state of Washington, they're my kids. And I got to thinking about that after I walked in from talking with him. And I thought, once I coach you, you're family. In many ways, you're like family to me. And then I thought, how many of them think that way about me, though? And what am I doing with this relationship while I have them in my life, while I'm coaching them, while I'm a teacher teaching them? What am I doing with the relationship to create that feeling that they too would then feel the same way about me? And I thought, I need to do all that I can to build the relationship with my kids to make sure that they look at me as one of their kids. Excuse me, they look at me as not their dad, but a parent, like a parent, and look at me in such a way that they would go, yeah, I feel like I was one of his kids. There we go. That's probably the better way I wanted to say that. And so it's one of those things where it's not just going to happen. You have to get intentional about creating that kind of a relationship. And I think I always was. Even in my first few years teaching and coaching at the Catholic high school back in the suburb of Chicago, Carmel Catholic High School, just an outstanding place to teach and coach. Those are still my kids. I was there for my first 11 years, 1982 to 1993. And many of my former players, of course, but even students of mine, they're friends of mine on Facebook. And, we still have a connection. It was my birthday last week, and I had numerous birthday wishes, happy birthday, coach, and happy birthday from some of them. They weren't players of mine, but they were students of mine. And it's like, I get chills thinking about it, because that's been one of the greatest things professionally for me for the last 40 years is having these kids in my life. And the kids who I'm talking about there are in their 50s. So they're not kids anymore. They have kids of their own. Heck, I imagine some of them are getting to a point of having grandkids. Wow. It just boggles the mind. And any of you who've coached for a while know exactly what I'm talking about. But getting back to the main point, my boys, my girls, these are my kids. And I feel that way. I feel very strongly that way. And I wonder if you feel that way too. Do you have that same level of, those are my kids? And what have you done to create that? How did you build that? And if you haven't had that, what do you need to do to change that if you're still coaching. I coach 8th grade boys right now. And now I have a new crop of my kids. In fact, they're my boys who were my boys last year. I had them in 7th grade, and I love coaching these boys. They are an absolute blast. They're my boys, and it's so fun when you do this and you build those kind of relationships, to be able to inundate yourself with it like I am right now, and know that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, now 40 years for me down the road, you'll still have kids to look back on and say, those are my kids. Now, of course, I have in real life kids, but these are also in their own way my kids. And it's one of the best things about being a teacher and a coach, is having these kids in your life. But again, what are you doing to create that and develop that relationship in such a way that you'll feel that way, but more importantly, that they'll feel that way about you? I think it's something that we all need to try and do, and do the best we can, because that's when this gets really special. So hope you enjoy the message, but I hope you enjoy thinking about your kids while we're going through this. Scroll down and leave a message and let us know, how do you feel? How do you feel about that concept of them being your kids, and where do you fall in it? Because I'm sure many of you would feel that way as well, especially those of you who've been in it in a while. I really, really wholeheartedly believe in that concept that, once I coach you, you're part of my family. And I was never one of those guys who, we break huddles saying family and things like that. Sometimes, yeah, but I still wanted to foster a family atmosphere. Sure, I just felt that way about them, like, they feel like my kids, and it's a real special feeling. And for those of you who have been there for a while, I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, scroll down, leave a message, and let us know your thoughts on that concept. And we'll talk to you again next time.